Hello and welcome to the NDTV WEF debate coming to you from the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, there are lots of things you can say about India, but being dull is not one of them. And there has been all sorts of excitement around India in recent weeks and recent months. And here at Davos, over the last few years, India has tended to change in public perception and in conversations out here, from being the superpower in waiting and a country which is right up there with China to a country which is almost written off for the last couple of years. And now again there's a lot of interest. What exactly is happening in India and what perhaps are the changes that could happen after the election? So we've put together a panel the like of which I actually haven't seen discussing India in a long, long time. So each of them experts in different aspects of it. So we will get a sense by the time the next hour is over of what exactly is happening in India. I want to start off by welcoming the Finance Minister of India, Mr. Chidambaram. It's great to have you, sir, with us. Nikesh Arora of Google, Indian origin, but really been back there as well, going back, taking a look at it, and now as being part of one of the largest companies in the world, we'd be interested to get an international perspective from the business point of view. Sunil Mittal, one of India's best-known industrialists, so it's great to have you with us on this panel. Jeremy Bennett is the CEO of Nomura, who worked as a banker in India, actually, as a about, what is it, almost 20, 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, you weren't meant to mention that, but thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, there you are. It's a couple of years in Kolkata, a couple of years in Mumbai. And Tom Friedman, arguably one of the best-known journalists in the world, Tom, if I can say that, but certainly one of the people who's been writing a lot about India. In The World is Flat, you set out a certain model for what was going to happen to India. That model was somewhat under question the last few years. We'll find out whether it's coming back or not. And of course, a great audience whom I will go to for questions as we go forward. But sir, can I just start off by jumping straight into it? Is this in some way for India, when you look at the outlook for India, is 2014 essentially going to be the year when the election happened and changed everything one way or the other? And I have to, at the risk of being, I have to say that there are some people who've been saying that the government has not been doing all that well for the last 2 or 3 years. And is the Congress now tottering a little bit? So are we going to have a new government a few months from now?
We will have a new government, but it could still be led by the same Congress party. Well, I don't think the government has been tottering. We've had our difficulties, but the last 18 months or so, we have squarely faced these difficulties. We have taken a number of steps to stabilize the economy. And what I hear from everyone I meet in Davos and elsewhere is that we have succeeded substantially in stabilizing the economy.
Succeeded in stabilizing the economy. Let me just get a sense of that as to where India is right now and then look forward a bit. Sunil, you want to comment on that? Has the economy been stabilized from where we were a year, 2 years ago, or not yet?
Well, I think the government has used all the tools at its command in terms of interventions to allay some of the fears that were building up in the last 8 to 10 months in particular. Rupee has steadied again from going as high as 67, 68, 69 back to 61-ish. So I would say the government is alive to the problems. The question is, do they have enough tools in their arsenal today in the next few months to sort of bring back the confidence of business people, entrepreneurs back, to invest into the areas which matters most? My own view is we give less credit to the government for what they've done. My own view is if you really look at the reform process, while we can say some of the issues got missed out, insurance, defense, FDI being a couple of them, I think it is not for the lack of the government's will to do it. They have tried everything possible to move that ahead. And the multi-brand retail FDI, aviation FDI, my own view is a lot of things have moved. We give them less credit. My own view is my own community is waiting perhaps for a clearer signal to start voting with their feet again in the market.
So the sense of despondency that there was, when you spoke to people in Indian industry, they used to say, well, we are starting to invest outside, there are too many policy flip-flops, we're not quite sure what's happening. It's, has that started to change? Or because you still hear those comments, you hear them all the time.
I wouldn't say it has changed. I'll be very honest here. People are still hedging their bets. And to my mind, that is the problem the government is facing. That the industry is not responding to the changes that the government is making on their side, the moves that they are making on their side. And I'm sure the finance minister must be sometimes feeling frustrated that he's moved a long way ahead to the demands of the industry, to the demands of the economy, and yet we perhaps don't respond.
Do you think you've done everything which you possibly could? Or some of those policy flip-flops that have worried people, tough taxation, retrospective tax, some of those issues which have been really on the agenda. Have you done all that you possibly could, you think?
We have done a lot, and those issues are no longer the major concerns of my interlocutors when I meet them. No one really talks about retrospective legislation. So one-off case, and we have laid out a path to resolve that case. I think if you look at the foreign investor, they have come into India in a big way in the last 12 months or so. In pharma, in telecommunications, they've come in a very big way. I agree that the Indian investor is still hedging his bets, especially the big industrial houses. But at the SME level and at the medium industries level, bankers tell me that the demand for credit is still very high. So investments are taking place. I think the despondency that was there a year ago has lifted. That's my sense. But you can ask the audience when their turn comes.
Okay, I will do just that. In fact, Varun, I'll start off by asking both of you that now. Nikesh?
Well, from our perspective, we've been very bullish on India from a long-term perspective. Young population, very technologically savvy, a population which is intellectually curious, is always wanting to innovate, wanting to do new things. So we find that it's a great market for us to put our services out there as well as to see business grow. As a foreign investor, as a company investing in India for the long term, we could do with some more certainty, as we'd love to see policies that are going to stay the same for a while so we can actually keep going and investing in the market. We'd love to see more investment in infrastructure because that actually helps not just our business, but we believe that helps the long-term growth rate for the market for the next 15 years. So from that perspective, we'd hope for some more continued change and most importantly, certainty.
So if I can interpret that a bit, are you saying that India is still not as easy a country to do business in as it should be?
It's a fair country to do business in. I think once in a while, it's hard to find the commitment in certain areas or some things change, and that's where we'd like more certainty. But from a doing business, there are much harder countries around the world to do business in, not India.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you said superpower in waiting had come under question. I don't think there's any question about that. When I was in India, I think one of the wonderful things about India is it's a naturally self-critical country, and that's a trait that's incredibly valuable. I was there in 1987, 88, and everyone was, wondering whether anything would happen. And look at the place now; it's transformed. So I have no doubt about it. Our economists are talking about growth recovering. Yes, it could recover faster. There's always things that you could do better, but it's a fabulous place to invest.
So you're saying, interesting, that's an interesting point of view. So you're saying that Indians sometimes are more critical about their own country than the rest of the world would be?
Completely. I travel the world and I go to many countries that are in a far worse state than India, where, naturally people are massively optimistic. You come to India, talk to some people here, and they're all gloomy. It's not that bad.
I am now going to give Mr. Chidambaram a chance to blame the media for that. Mr. Chidambaram, it's the media's fault, right?
He's right.
I knew it.
We tend to be self-critical. We tend to self-flagellate ourselves. Please remember that among the large economies of the world, India still remains one of the 5 countries which are growing at 5% and above. Every country has slowed down. China has slowed down from 9% to 7%. India has slowed down from 7.5% to 5%. But there are countries which have negative growth, countries which are in recession, countries which have registered 0.1% growth. This is part of the business cycle in the world. We must take the cycle as it is and try to find ways in which the cycle will turn. I believe it has turned in India. And the Global Economic Outlook put out yesterday says in calendar 2014, which is our financial year 2014-15, 9 months plus 3 months, India will grow at 6.2%. This is what I've been saying for the last year. that next year India will grow at over 6%. The year after that, we will grow at over 7%, and we will then reach our potential growth rate of 8%. So I don't see why people are gloomy. I think those who have too much money are gloomy. Those who have little money and who invest small amounts or do small businesses are not so gloomy.
Okay, I am going to come to the Aam Aadmi in just a couple of minutes. But Tom, if I could just come across you, all right, let's take the point. Perhaps there's too much self-criticism, too much self-flagellation. But the promise and the potential of India, because at the end of the day, you should be measuring India not against what others are doing, but what India's own potential is. And when you wrote The World is Flat, and that image and the vision you had of what India would eventually come to be, has it disappointed you to some sense?
Well, you never want to be just the cleanest dirty shirt. You want to be leading the parade, and so I'd be a little careful about those kind of comparisons. I remain hugely optimistic about India for a couple of reasons. First is the Moises Naim rule, which was coined here at Davos, that whichever country is up this year at Davos will be down next year. And that means that if you're down this year, you're going to have a great 2014. Okay. So
yes and no. The Davos has been down on India for the last 2 years. So we're still waiting for the.
Then for sure. Look, I think the thing to keep in mind is this: that I wrote The World is Flat because I like to look at the world starting with the plumbing. What's going on in terms of technology and innovation, because that really tells you what is possible. And the plumbing of the world really changed since I just wrote that book. I believe that when historians look back on the first decade of the 21st century and ask what was the most important thing to happen then, they will say it was not 9/11, it was not the subprime crisis, it was the merger of globalization and the IT revolution at a whole new scale. The world's gone from connected to hyper-connected. And therefore, you don't just fall behind when you lose a year or two. You don't just fall behind arithmetically. You can fall behind exponentially. And when the world goes from connected to hyper-connected, governance really matters. Now, I would be the last person coming from Washington, D.C., to be lecturing any other democracy about governance. I've seen my own Congress shut down our government. Our Congress today is a forum for legalized bribery. Okay, we have a huge problem as a big pluralistic democracy, and I think some of the challenges India faces are very similar. And I think that it's going to take a lot of fresh thinking how to overcome them, because you have big challenges, we have big challenges. And the only way to face big challenges, the only way to do big, hard things is to do them together. And if you can't do things together, you end up with suboptimal solutions cobbled together at midnight with no due diligence. And when you attack every major problem you face with suboptimal solutions thrown together at midnight with no due diligence, you do that over time, you start to fall behind. I say that as an American. If there's an allegory for India, I'll leave it to you.
But I've read in many of your columns you're saying, there's still this question, where is democracy leading all of these countries? I mean, look at what China is doing. And isn't it so wonderful to be autocratic? You still hold that democracy at the end of the day is going to triumph? And India is going to prove that?
Yeah, I still believe in India's enormous human talent. I mean, what happened is the world just didn't go from connected to hyper-connected. It's gone from interconnected to interdependent. It's a difference of degree that's a difference in kind. And one of India's enormous strengths, it seems to me, is its ability to manage pluralism. It's noisy, it's messy, on the edges it can be violent at times, but this is a country of 1.05 billion people coming from speaking 100 different languages that holds free and fair elections on a regular basis, and where the votes are counted and not the ballots, not the bullets. And imagine for 1 second that India looked like Syria today. The very world we live in, not the neighborhood, the very world we live in would be different. And I believe in an interconnected world, in an interdependent world, India's pluralism and its ability to to manage its pluralism is a huge asset, not only for India, but for the world. But all those things are true, and they're all in the future. At the end of the day, though, governance matters. You've got to get the governance right.
Okay, so governance, another thing I do want to talk about, but can I just come back to the three of you on the change of the plumbing of the world economic system? Because what Tom is therefore arguing is that something basic has happened now. And that basic change that has happened means that India is on a different trajectory, and 1 or 2 years of slow growth is not going to change that. Would you agree with that, Jeremy?
I'd agree with that for two reasons. For everyone here who's got kids, what you want if the world's going hyper-connected and IT plumbed, you want a growing body of young people who are going to embrace new technology. And the one big economy of the world that's got that in spades is India. You've got 12.8 million young people joining the job market every year, and those are going to be the people who get IT. You know, the old guys like us, you know, we're a bit slow to pick it up. Those kind of people pick it up incredibly quickly. So I think that is absolutely important. And you also want to have a 57% of your population in service industries. The same amount of people in service industries in India as in America. I find that statistic amazing. If we are going to IT plumbing, that's the kind of background you want. So I'm very optimistic.
You know, Vikram, just say one thing, and I've said this before here, so pardon me if people heard it, but when I sat down to write The World is Flat in 2004, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky. 4G was a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications what you sent to college. Big data was a rap star, and Skype was a typo. Okay? All of that changed in just the last 7 years. All right? So I know something about the world going from connected to hyper-connected because I watched it before my eyes.
All right. So as one of the people who's been doing that plumbing, if you like, and connecting everything, has something changed? Because this is important. We're looking at the outlook for India. What we are just hearing is something has changed, and it's an inflection point. So don't get too pessimistic on India too soon, because something has happened which cannot be reversed. Sunil?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. If you look at the power of technology, it has been on full display in India. We have a connected India, 800 to 900 million people who are on mobile phones in one form or the other connected to the world, increasingly getting onto broadband now. So it has its huge benefits in terms of disintermediation of many businesses, therefore some disruptions, but it's empowering people, it's getting people more informed, it's providing products and services at a fraction of cost that the physical infrastructure will do. So to my mind, and in fact sometimes you get less celebrated. My own view is the technology world, the telecom world, and the internet world have actually served the nation in a fantastic manner in the last 10 odd years.
All right. Nikesh, the flip side of that, I guess, would be that as the world gets more and more connected, competition also goes up. You're talking about India being able to do a lot of these things, but they are the frontier markets now. And then there's going to be Africa. There's a number of other places where talent can be found, and where if India doesn't get its act together, especially in the question of infrastructure and governance, it may still miss the bus.
Well, I don't think so. I think it goes back to what the finance minister was saying earlier, is that, you know, if you get India connected right, which Sunil is referring to, and we're seeing a lot of improvement in the last few years, you will see the emergence of the small, medium-sized businesses. You finally take away the barriers for them to grow. So, you know, you get a very large information, communication, and distribution network at your behest, where the friction is very, very low. And if that begins to happen, you will see a lot of grassroots movement as small businesses are concerned. You'll see grassroots movement on the social front, and a lot of the politics, a lot of the governance is going to change. And it's going to change because the young people are going to take the technology and start using technology in a more aggressive way. You know? Why do I have to wait for 5 years to find out how my member of parliament did in parliament when I can vote every day and tell them what I think? Now, yeah, you don't want people voting every day, because then you have nothing, you know, you're constantly trying to second guess yourself. At the same time, you don't want to wait for 5 years. So we're going to have to find a new balance in the new world, with everybody being hyper connected, with all these wonderful things that Tom said so eloquently. But you know, things will change. And competition, I think India is a very, very large market in itself. If India, which it has most of its act together, we'll see competitors coming out of India with 1 billion people to serve much faster than you can in smaller markets around the world. But yes, do we need to move things faster? Has the pace of innovation changed? It has. Does that mean we have to change our pace in terms of how we get stuff done? Yes.
All right, so we've heard some of the good news, especially when it comes to the long-term potential, but let me just come back then to the immediate problems. And two broad areas, and we've touched on many of them. Infrastructure continues to be a problem, and governance. And in infrastructure, I have to say it's increasingly becoming slightly patchy. I just had the chance to see the new terminal in Mumbai, and the new airport terminal in Mumbai, and the new airport terminal in Delhi. They're as good as anything you would see in Europe or in America. And you step just outside that, and you'll have roads which would be, which are awful. So it's a bit patchy in infrastructure. And governance continues to, in many ways, be our single big issue, which governments are struggling to deliver.
What's the question?
I'm asking whether you agree that those are the two problems.
Yes. Let's take governance. Governance in India today is not the monopoly or responsibility of one political party. We have Congress governments in 12 states. We have BJP governments in half a dozen states. The remaining states are ruled by different political parties. So the quality of governance is uneven. Secondly, many of the infrastructure problems have to be addressed at three levels of government: the central government, the state government, and the municipal government. Take Delhi. You have a central government of one party, you have a state government of another party, which I don't know if they have unraveled more in the last couple of days. And then you have municipal governments, or three municipal governments by a third party. So there will always be difficulties in implementing infrastructure projects in India. We'll have to find a model by which infrastructure projects can be insulated from political influences, and they can be implemented by, say, an SPV or any other arrangement which just gets the job done. If we can build a Delhi metro, if we can build a Mumbai airport, which is as good as any in the world, why can't we make roads which are as good as any in the world? So that's the issue about governance and infrastructure. They are related, but I think things will get better as people demand better governance. I agree with what he said. People will demand better and better governance, more and more accountability, and governments will be pushed to deliver on the ground.
So this is another theory, by the way, talking about the different levels of India. This is another theory that is being increasingly spoken about. Look at India increasingly. It is a federation of states, and different states are going to be in competition, and that's where you're going to start finding a lot of action. Is that what anybody here at Davos looking at India should increasingly start doing? Look at India, but also look at individual states and what's happening there. Sudhir?
No, absolutely. I think many of us are working very closely with states, especially those who have single large projects.
And is there a big difference between states?
There is, absolutely. Yes. Oh my God, there is. There are states which are very alive to the needs. I was in Punjab just about 3 weeks back. They've come out with a new industrial policy. My own view is I've never seen anything like this in my life before. For the first time, they've dispensed with almost all the certification that you needed to start an industry. You can self-certify, no need to have anything notarized anymore. There are tax reliefs which are being given. Punjab, to my mind, will start picking up. If this remains as the model for the rest of the country, other states will soon follow. Gujarat has been talked about many times. Maharashtra has been attracting a lot of industry. My own view is states are competing, and that's good for the country.
Is that something which you keep an eye on also when you're looking at India? Pick the state as much as anything else?
I think increasingly, I think a bit of competition is a good thing. And competition between different governmental areas is as good as competition. I work in an industry which is incredibly competitive, and I think that's healthy. So, yeah, anything that can make some of the bureaucracy that is an issue, and it's an issue in many countries, not just India, be refined, go away. I don't believe in light regulation. I believe in a good, sensible dose of regulation, particularly in the financial industry. But I think it's incredibly important that regulation gets refined by a bit of competition, and I think that's a healthy thing. I was always asked, if you were ever Prime Minister, what law would you pass? I think the law you pass is to abolish a law every time you make a law, and I think if you can chip away at bureaucracy by competition between states, that's a very good thing for India.
Tom, are you getting that same sense of a competition between states in India, which may at the end of the day end up being the India story for the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't know Indian politics well enough to drill down that deeply. I'll give you an analogy from America and our federal system, which allows for enormous experimentation. Has always been an asset. But at the end of the day, you need a federal government that's doing its job. And, George W. Bush, coined the phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. And sometimes I worry about that with India, which is, well, this is how we are, and this is how things are, and, what can you do? And I think it has to be careful not to fall into that. That the road from New Delhi to the Taj Mahal, your iconic, heritage site, should not be the mess that it is. It just that to me is someone settling for too low a common denominator.
Yeah. Okay, so Niket, both have been said. Too much self-flagellation, and also sometimes a willingness with that chalta hai attitude, or jugaad. I don't know how to translate jugaad into English. It's like somehow managing. Yeah.
Resourcefulness.
Yeah, resourcefulness.
Yes.
In a sense, I guess. Yes. So which do you see more of?
You definitely see a lot of resourcefulness in India, for sure.
You mean that in a positive or a negative manner? I'm trying to figure out.
I actually mean that in a positive manner. I try to explain myself when I left India and I went to the US. We're used to solving problems with a lot of constraints, and that requires a lot of resourcefulness. And what's fascinating is, if you talk to people in Silicon Valley, they will tell you that you get the best amount of innovation when there's a lot of constraint. If you have unlimited access to resources, you're unlikely to solve the problem quickly and prioritize the right answer, because you have unlimited resources, you're going to spend a lot of time. So constraints are actually a good thing. But I'm not sure what your question was vis-a-vis jugaad.
But perhaps if the system was working a bit better, you wouldn't need so much jugaad. Does that occur to you?
Well, I think you have a different connotation of jugaad than I do. I think resourcefulness in the system is good. I think, could we do with more progress? Yes, we could. Could we, do people believe we are self-flagellating in India? I think I'm sort of going to agree with Tom a little bit that there's a little bit of sort of people adjust to the current state by saying, this is it, this is okay, we're used to this. And I think that's a temporary stage. I think with the conversation we're having about hyperconnectivity and people being able to express their opinions a lot quicker and a lot faster, you are going to see this call to action start coming in from the grassroots, which you are seeing, I guess.
Okay, call to action coming from the grassroots. Now, frankly, we have been seeing that to some extent or the other. We've been seeing this approach. Many people say that India suddenly seems to be becoming a slightly more chaotic place. There's been these middle-class movements on the streets. You've had actually the Chief Minister of Delhi literally on the streets, sleeping on the side of his car in just the last few days. So is that the call to action that he's talking about? Is there a bit more chaos that's coming in?
I hope not. I hope he is not advocating the chaos that we are seeing in Delhi today. That's not a call to action. Somebody sent me an SMS. They said, Vishnu told Arjun, go do your dharma. But he told Kejriwal, go do your dharna. That's not governance. That's abdicating governance. If you don't know how to govern, quit. You can't mask
your... But government is supported by your party.
Well, as I said before I left India, opinion in the party was divided. The local unit took that decision, right or wrong. The point is, whoever is in government must govern. You can't mask your inability to govern by street agitations. The line that divides agitation and anarchy is a very thin line. And they may have crossed that line in the last few days.
So as we head for the 2014 election, in a sense, you have got the Congress facing the challenges, and the Congress has almost been off the headlines, if you like, for a period of time anyway, because at one hand, you have a person who's a challenger, Narendra Modi, and people are saying he's coming and he's leading the BJP forward. And then you have the Aam Aadmi Party grabbing headlines for other reasons.
You guys write the headlines, we don't.
I knew that you'd come down to the media at some point.
No, you talked about headlines. I don't write the headlines. I don't tell you what should your lead story be in your 8 o'clock broadcast. I don't tell the editor of the newspaper what the front page story should be. I think the media tends to write off parties. Media tends to prematurely celebrate parties, but that's the right of the media. I think it's too early to call what the next elections will be. There's still 2.5 months. Much can change. I admit that the Congress party appears to be the underdog today, but I think it's good to go into an election as an underdog rather than in a triumphal mood.
Okay, well, I am conscious that there's no opposition party out here, so I don't want to make this about domestic Indian politics, especially in a forum like Davos. But I just wanted to ask what are the stakes in this election? And we have seen some competing visions really coming up in these elections. It's a change. Whatever you may say about Mr. Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party, it's a change from politics like we've ever seen in India. Narendra Modi, what he says, what he represents, what he's putting out as his vision is also a change. And in a sense, he's making it a referendum on leadership. Is this going to be a really critical election?
You know, one thing I can say, I'm a keen political observer. I watch things. I think we have changed the leaf here. We have turned the page decisively in India. There's no question about that. For me, Aam Aadmi is nothing but an expression of people's disillusionment with the current political system. So it's an expression. I mean, I leave the other part of government, because I don't want to comment on that. The fact is, politics has become suddenly much more accountable. People who wish to be in government, in leadership roles, need to now know that they are going to be held accountable. So I would say some of the politicians need to be worried, because society, people are going to seek accountability. Now, what happens in the next election is, you know, as Mr. Chidambaram said, is hard to predict. It's one of the most difficult elections to predict, I would say. It is going to be one of the most interesting elections from an observer point of view after 1977, I would say. Jury's out. 2.5 months is a long time in politics. Let's see where it goes.
Okay. Are you at all, Jeremy, keeping the elections in mind when you're making your investment decisions in India, or no?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic for international investors. I mean, for India to fulfill its potential, you need two things. You need domestic confidence. So everyone watching this needs to feel more confident about the future, but international investors, because you're going to need the capital to grow as fast as you should grow. And I think we do watch very carefully. I mean, what international investors need is to understand what the rules of the road are, understand how the legal system works, understand how facilitation will work when they launch a long-term project, and to make sure that things happen a little bit faster. So I was very positive about the things in India, but I think everyone recognizes if things can happen a little faster and the rules of the road are clearer, that will help.
Okay. Nikesh?
I guess we have a tendency to overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term. I think, yes, the elections are important, but I still believe in the long term India will fulfill its potential of growth. So these are all temporary things that are going to happen in the way, which I'm sure the domestic market will resolve. So we are long-term bullish on the market. We continue to invest because we believe at the end, as I said in the beginning, you have a young population, very technologically savvy. They're going to go out and innovate. They're going to go out and adapt and adopt technology, and you're going to see the SMEs all get engaged. So it's a good market.
So for a Google, it doesn't really matter who's forming the government to that extent. Unless it's somebody who comes and says we're going to ban the internet, in which case you have issues. In which case there are lots of issues.
It's a variable we cannot control. So we're going to observe, and we're going to keep investing in the market. And I suspect there's a lot of people in the country who will make sure they will keep the government accountable. And if they keep them accountable for the interest of the user, we'll be fine.
Okay. Tom, I know you haven't been to India to get a sense of what's happening in the elections. I'm not going to ask you to predict how many seats the Congress Party or the BJP
I wouldn't hazard to get into. There are two reasons that I'm optimistic about India in the long term. The first is I think we're heading for a world, as the world gets hyper-connected, where literally in our lifetimes, everyone in the world will be online. We'll have a network connection. So this thing called the digital divide, I think is going to be in our rear view mirror. Now, when that happens, the futurist Marina Gorbis taught me this. The biggest divide in the world, once everyone's on the network, is going to be the motivational divide. And I think India's culture of education, prizing education, is going to be a real asset for that. But it's got to fulfill that aspiration by delivering the infrastructure for education for its people. The online MOOCs, I think, are going to give an enormous opportunity there. The other thing, I go back to The World is Flat. So I wrote The World is Flat in 2004 at a time when the world had just gotten enough connectivity where we could draw on 150,000 Indian engineers to solve our problem. And our problem was Y2K. So we were worried as a the millennium change, that our computers and our electronic systems and our water systems were going to shut down, and there was just enough connectivity at the turn of the century that we could suddenly leverage all this Indian talent. Now, whenever I go to India, and every time I go, I do the same thing. I call NASSCOM, the Indian High Tech Association. I say, get me together with your 7, 8 best young entrepreneurs. And I do this every year I go. And here's what I've really found exciting and fascinating, is that what I now see is young Indian entrepreneurs leveraging all this technology, not to solve our problems, but to solve their problems and on their cost platforms. And as they solve more and more of their problems, of course, they're the world's problems and they're our problems too. We can have 1 billion more people, not just in India, working on the world's biggest problems. And if you want to be optimistic about the world, to me, that's the biggest reason.
So the elections, let me just drag you back to that. What are the elections going to mean to you, other than being the greatest pageant of democracy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, the first thing is, when 1/7 of the world holds an election, you should pay attention. Who wins that election really does matter. But I just really hope that it is able to produce a government, and again, I'm saying this from an American point of view. We live in an age, the downside of all this technology that we've talked about, the upside is the transparency. It's fantastic. You can say when that teacher didn't show up at school. You can trace whether the money came from the federal government to the village where it was supposed to go. But at the same time, to govern in this world, to be any kind of public figure, it is incredibly noisy, and it's going to get noisier. And you almost have an instant poll, whether you're writing a column in the New York Times or you have to be the finance minister of India. And to govern under those conditions is going to really test democracy, I believe.
Right. Mr. Chairman, let me just test a hypothesis on you. Whether it's a company or whether it's a country, one of the first things that you look for is leadership. Now, there is a perception, which we can debate whether it's a correct or a bad or a wrong perception, that India has been lacking leadership a little bit. So, in a sense, what Mr. Modi represents is leadership, and he's trying to make this a referendum on leadership. Even what's been happening with the Aam Aadmi Party or other movements coming in, anytime you have a vacuum of leadership, then a whole lot of other things happen to come in and fill that up, whether it's the judiciary playing a role, mass movements playing a role, the media playing a role, social media playing a role. That's what happens when you have a vacuum of leadership.
Well, I don't agree there's been a vacuum of leadership. Only 4 years ago, you were praising the leadership of the government and said we have delivered 8.5% growth over a period of 5 years. Yes, there's been a certain lack of decisiveness. But that doesn't mean there's a vacuum of leadership. That's why I advocate that the next election should throw up a new generation of leaders. If young people can be top-class businessmen, top-class lawyers, doctors, accountants, why can't young persons, men and women in India, be top-class parliamentarians, top-class ministers? I think the time has come to hand over the leadership of the government to a younger generation. That you will see will bring a greater decisiveness and drive in the leadership of the government.
Okay, so I just want to say something that really from the minister's lips to God's ears, as we would say, because one of the things that worries me in America and worries me about India is that politics becomes so dirty, so noisy, and so brutal. And it's always been, we know, but there are differences of degree that become a difference in kind. That good people of talent, just look at it. Look at the Republican lineup we had in the last election. It was the Star Wars bar. I mean, it was. These are people you would never pay money to hear them speak about anything. Okay, and there's a reason for that, because so much of our talent, whether it's in the business or academic world or the social entrepreneur world, they look at politics now, and they look at the amount of money you have to raise. I was having breakfast with a senator recently, and he told me that another senator told him that he had just come to the Senate, that the thing you watch every quarter you have to report your cash on hand as a senator or a congressman. And he said one senator advised him, never let your cash on hand go below 10 million, otherwise someone will run against you. That's no longer about governance anymore. That's about something, and if you are a serious person and you're looking at that mountain to climb, I'd rather go to Silicon Valley.
All right, Sunil, the point that I was making about the vacuum of leadership, has that been a perception? When you talk to a lot of people, that's the sense they get, and that's why a lot of what's happening in India are forces coming in to fill that vacuum.
You know, I've been a bit of contrarian on this one. I don't believe there's been a vacuum, but I think Mr. Chidavan did mention sometimes you feel that the government is not decisive enough. And I think many a times people don't see that when they are decisive, they want to move things. You don't have a parliament session going. You don't have agreements with the opposition parties. I think the government is hemmed in today by a set of coalition partners which have their own very strong agendas. And I think we have to grant it. We have a parliamentary system which does not allow this government to run through legislations. But on the executive side, let's talk about telecommunications. We have decisively moved into a very firm ground. Auctions are happening. 100% FDI has been allowed. India has joined the club of rare developed nations where 100% of FDI is allowed in telecom. My own view is different. There has been a lot of decision making. It's just that, like we probably started by saying, we beat ourselves a lot and say we don't have leadership, we have a vacuum. My own belief is government can do a lot more, should have done a lot more, but are we saying that they have not done enough? I don't agree. My own view is they have done a lot of things given the constraints that they have operated in.
Nikesh, leadership?
Oh, I think this one I'm going to leave to my esteemed colleagues here who live in
You're
the
going to
country.
duck.
Yes.
Okay, he's going to duck that one. Right. I am going to turn to the audience now and start taking some comments from here. All right, the gentleman here, can we get a mic to him?
My name is Sam White, co-founder of Promethean Power. Just wanted to follow up with what Nikesh said about when there's a need, innovation flows up. And particularly in rural India, when you have a lack of reliable power, there's a real need. And our Indian colleagues have developed an energy storage device that is eliminating the need for a diesel generator when storing things like milk, fruits and vegetables. And this is a technology that we will be taking back to the U.S. to apply, because there's not enough innovation in the U.S. when there's not a need like there is in India.
All right, so need can sometimes drive innovation. That I think was a point that has been made here as well. All right, let me get another couple of questions from here. Anybody else with a hand? Okay, right here in the front row.
Thank you very much. Terry McGraw-Hill. Scott, I agree with your optimism in all that, and sometimes I wonder why, but you know, we're very, very excited about our operations in India and how well they're doing. Sunil, when we start talking about you know, where the growth comes from, the answer to every question we have and every policy that has to support it is growth. So where's it coming from? The large industrial base in India was where that growth was coming from, and now it has shifted to foreign direct investment coming in the services sector, and with supply chain management, you're opening up lots of different kinds of opportunities. The problem from a governance side, from the outside looking in, is it's not the national government anymore. That was very dominant on that one. State governments now are also getting very aggressive, and cities are getting very aggressive, and they're competing against each other. And so from the outside looking in, the question would be is, you know, how does policy now get distributed more evenly when you have that kind of competition going forward? The last question is, Finance Minister, is when we start talking about growth, we start talking right up front about trade and investment. And trade has been a very difficult subject for India. It hasn't opened itself up as well. How does that have to change? And when you start talking about financing for growth and investment, you come right back to what you were talking about in terms of infrastructure. Why isn't there more a demand, and again, more unity coming back with state governments to make it happen?
All right. Do you want to take that first?
Well, I don't know why you say that we are not opening up on trade. If you have the EU FTA in mind, yes, that is stuck for reasons that are well known. But we have entered into FTAs, we've entered into comprehensive economic cooperation agreements or partnership agreements with a host of countries. Recently with ASEAN, we have updated the earlier agreement. We are opening up to trade. In fact, it is Indian industry which is complaining we're opening up too fast and reducing tariffs too fast. But the government has remained on course, and we are opening up to trade. And we are very supportive of FTAs. We are very supportive of exports, and we have opened up imports. So I think it may not be fair to say that we are not open to freer trade. There is a problem with the FTA with the European Union, but that's a matter which we have to discuss separately.
Okay, Sunil, you want to?
I think perhaps Terry was talking more on the multilateral piece of the WTO round. I think, Terry, India did finally come out well and strong and has given enough, joy to the world in terms of putting the trade facilitation piece forward. That's gone through in the last round in Bali. And on the peace clause, yes, I mean, there were issues, and I believe both US and India sat down and sorted it out. From my perspective, it would have been very easy for a commerce minister to have no deal and come back victorious. That was a very easy part. What he's done is he's done the deal, trade facilitation has gone through, the peace clause has been accepted, people have moved forward on many areas, and yet he came back victorious. Mind you, we had elections coming up in the next 90, 120 days, and this was a tough call for India. So on the WTO piece, I think that's where Terry was coming from. And I know he, as the ICC chair, has been working very hard.
All right, let me just take a question which is coming online from Twitter, actually. Ian Bremer has this question. Turning to the question of governance, my thoughts, China grows because of government, India grows in spite of it.
That's a caricature of the situation. We've heard this said many times. I'm not for a moment questioning China's growth or what the government there has done to promote that growth. But China works in a very different system. 7 people have to take the decisions, and that's the decision which cannot be questioned by anyone. We work under a very different system. We have checks and balances. We have independent constitutional authorities. We have a civil society. We have courts which can strike down decision, as they have often done. We have public interest litigation. And we have street protests. So there's no need to compare. There's no point in comparing the Chinese system with the Indian system. Someone who said that should then add, I wish to have the Chinese system. But I'm sure she or he does not wish to add that line.
But probably not. But I just have to say you are going to hear the similar comparisons made. And again, coming back to 2014, because what Mr. Modi and the BJP are saying is, again, on the question of governance, they said governance, and they are saying, look, for example, what Mr. Modi would say, look what I've done in Gujarat, and why can't this be done now at the national level? And if I become Prime Minister, I will do this at the national level. That's pretty much what he's saying in speech.
I think if any Chief Minister can make that claim, it should be the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, which has, on every single parameter, done better than Gujarat. And I gave out this comparison in a speech that I delivered in Pune, I think. Maharashtra and Gujarat were born on the same day. And let's look at Maharashtra's record and Gujarat's record, and Maharashtra outpaces Gujarat. I can challenge anyone to a debate on that.
All right, but perhaps in a different forum. I'm not sure who's going to get into that debate out here. All right, right at the back there, please.
Thanks, Vikram. Rana Kapoor from Yes Bank in India. I've had the experience last 10 years of building a bank in India, over 28 states and 7 union territories. By the time I go back, there may be one more state and one more UT. But the fact of the matter is, the experience of building a bank has taught me 2 or 3 things. One, there are over 53 cities in our country which have a population of more than 1 million people. There are approximately, I'm rounding it off to the nearest zero, 530 cities which have a population of between 100,000 to 1 million people. When you add up the cities and the towns all over the country, there are approximately 5,900 towns and cities in the country. But when you go across, you find literally there is opportunity in adversity. There is opportunity to grow wherever you go. But the amazing thing is, when you sit in the center in New Delhi, fortunately I'm in Bombay, but when I come there, and I was talking to the finance minister last night, that actually it boils down to, in my judgment, 3 words. It's about confidence, which has been discussed today. It's about conviction, and most of all, effective communication.
Okay.
This is my, question, and maybe just a comment.
The communication part is something that you have been talking about, that perhaps a better job could be done of communication. Especially in this era, in this connected era, maybe the communication could be a lot better.
Well, our leaders could be less reticent, let's put it that way.
That's leaders could be less reticent. Okay, so we are going to see a lot more less reticence.
I hope so. I've always believed that you must speak to the media at least once a week and at least 3 times a month. And I think communication is one of the most important aspects of governance. You have to communicate to the people what you are doing. For example, when we clamped down on gold imports to contain the current account deficit, if we had not communicated why we are doing it, we would have been hopelessly misunderstood. But people have come to accept the constraints we have placed on gold imports because we have communicated that it is vital to contain the current account deficit, even if it means that not enough gold will be imported into India.
Okay, so
that's an example.
Nikesh, we're going to use this to quickly grab him for a Google Hangout or two just after this, right? A lot of others as well as
he's done a few Google Hangouts. Thank you.
Okay, so communication, you heard some of those points. Confidence has not been there. Conviction, long term may be there, but short term the conviction is not there. And communication has certainly been awful.
Yeah, I think there will never be any harm in over-communicating. That we must all do. But my own view is long-term position of India is well understood by the foreign investors. I think long-term India is a great market, 1.2 billion people, $1 trillion economy. You cannot, talk enough about it. There's a big market waiting out there. People will be missing out on a very big market if they don't commit to India on a long-term basis. Of all the compliments I've given, one suggestion I'll give to the present and the future government is package projects, large projects, and deliver them to the world in a holistic manner. You should never have projects which are 60% finished, 80% finished, and then stuck. That creates a very, very negative position for India and the world. My own view is 10 big projects, package them well, deliver it to the world, India will be back in flavor.
All right, so we've heard a lot, I think, on the long-term outlook for India, and the long-term outlook is by and large been said to be really rosy. I'm going to now, before we wrap up this session, get each of you to really stick your neck out, if you will, and give us the medium-term outlook for India. 2014, what do you see happening, if anything? Tom, you want to start off with that?
No.
Or any other?
It's
too difficult.
Too difficult for me. I can't see.
Okay, then final thoughts from you other than that forecast.
People often ask me, and it's been a subtext of the conversation here. When I'm ever in India, people ask me about China. Whenever I'm in China, people ask me about India. So I've developed an answer, and my answer is that India and China are like two superhighways, but they each have a big question mark down the road. China, perfectly paved roads, white lines everywhere, sidewalks, street lights. It's great. One problem, there's a speed bump called political reform. And when 1.3 billion people going 85 miles an hour hit a speed bump, one of two things happens. The car jumps up in the air, hits the ground, everyone says, "You okay? You okay?" Drives on, or all the wheels fall off. Which will it be with China? We don't know. India, superhighway. Some of the white lines are not really there. Some of the sidewalks aren't finished. A few of the lights are out. But off in the distance, it looks like it smooths out into a beautiful superhighway. Is that a mirage or is that the oasis? I don't know.
All right. Really well put. Jeremy Bennett.
I think that's a lovely image. I call me a natural optimist, but I think both China and India plow through those question marks, through the speed bumps. They don't miss the lights. I think last week I was on a dirt bike trip in America, and I was trying to keep up with my colleagues who bike better than me. If you fall off because you're pushing it too hard, you hold everyone up. I quickly learned by the third day, and that's why I'm covered in bruises, that if you go a little more steadily, ultimately you don't hold anyone up. In fact, you start overtaking people. And so this is a marathon or a sprint. To your question of medium term, as I said earlier, I'm optimistic. I think after the elections, they already were seeing some growth after the elections. I think stability will make this a very attractive place to invest. But longer term, India's always been running this marathon, and it's going to make it, definitely.
Okay, Sunil?
Well,
Now,
I think,
you can try and take some guess at 2014, 2015.
I'm optimist.
Even in these 2 years?
Yes, I'm optimist because...
So the worst is behind us, you think?
Yeah, we've been to worse
The chaos that we are seeing right now is going to be over soon?
No, as I said, accountability will be high. The noise will be high. But that should not take away the growth story of India. Because on the ground, you're seeing people buying mobile phones, you're seeing people getting onto internet, you're seeing people buying more motorcycles. There's a lot of activity happening on the ground. Some pockets have weakened. Thankfully, agriculture has been strong in the last few quarters. My own belief is we will not get to 8-9% heady days very soon, but are the needles going to be pointing in the right direction? Yes. And once you see the needles in the right direction, confidence returns.
So tell me, a lot of the other captains of Indian industry, if you ever are speaking to them, they're saying, yeah, we're not really looking at India, we're now thinking of investing elsewhere. Thailand comes up for a variety of reasons. Interesting considering that the chaos that's been happening there, but a number of other countries come up. Is that just posturing, you think, or are they really thinking of voting with their feet out?
I think nobody's threatening that I'm taking my money out. As Tom mentioned, we are in a hyper-connected world. You will go and build opportunities. And to Nikesh's point, somebody who has an Indian market and you have reasonable leadership here, the scale allows you to go out, and you must go out. My own company is now in 20 countries outside India. And that is only because I have a big market in India. So I don't think so. You should take it as people saying, if you don't deliver, I'm moving my money out. I'm investing in India, and I'll also invest outside.
Okay, Nikesh?
I think for the last few months we've seen a better trend. I think things have gotten better. The part which I find fascinating in the last few months is the heightened awareness in the governance of the country that things have to change. Whether it is the Aam Aadmi, whether it's the conversations that are going around, there is more and more awareness. I suspect that the new elections cause more accountability and shake off the cobwebs and shake off the uncertainty that is going to hound us for the next few months. And we're in a business where the secular trend is our friend. As Tom said, there will not be anybody out there who will not be connected. I think 6 or 9 months ago, you could have said that there were some questions around the infrastructure in the telecom industry, which obviously has a bearing on what we do. Those seem to have come clean. There is auctions, as Sunil mentioned. There is spectrum available. So we see that there's likely going to be more investment in that market. So I think the uncertainty, to some large extent, is unraveling, is sort of behind us. I think going forward, we should see more certainty from our perspective.
Right.
And if you take a long-term view, we should be investing.
So before I come to you, Mr. Finance Minister, one of the other things that perhaps we haven't really spoken about too much is the question of corruption. You're talking about more awareness. A lot of this has been about talking about corruption. That's what the Aam Aadmi movement has been all about. Well, it started off by being all about fighting corruption before it went off into some slightly different areas. Is that something which you think is going to change?
Well,
and is India, you think, unusual? You're in a number of countries around the world. Do you think India is more corrupt than many of them?
You're not going to get an answer from me on this one. The fact is, there are projects which are stuck, and you can say they are stuck because of corruption. But equally, we can say they are stuck because there are a lot of, competitors of yours masquerading as NGOs, blocking one place or the other. So a lot of things are happening out there. You have to deal with it. It's chaotic. You have to move on. My own view is India is a good place to do business.
Okay. Jamie, you want to come in on the corruption and chaos part of it? Is it tougher because of issues like that?
I used to run emerging markets at Credit Suisse for many years before working in government and then taking on this job. And when you've travelled around the world, it is a horrible problem that exists around the world. I wouldn't like to comment whether India is worse or better than the rest, but from my perspective, the openness that you get in the world's largest democracy is a huge strength. And the openness that creates, the free press, the fact that we're talking now live on Indian television, that kind of openness, I think, is always your best defense.
All right. Well, I'm going to give the final word on this program to you, Mr. Chidambaram. Short term, medium term, long term, whatever you want to tell the crowd out here and the audience watching about the outlook for India.
Well, 1 year ago, I predicted that in 2014, calendar or 2014-15 financial year, we will get back to 6% growth. The World Economic Outlook put out yesterday, Global Economic Outlook, confirms that. I think what we have done to stabilize the economy lays the groundwork for achieving 6% plus growth in calendar 2014. And I think if the next government follows the paths that we have laid out, we will achieve 6% growth. And I'm willing to predict further. In 2015-16, we will achieve 7% growth. And then the year after, we will achieve our potential. I have no doubt about it, provided we adhere to the fundamental rules that we have laid down. Fiscal consolidation, raising resources, expending them wisely, we will achieve our growth. That's what the people of India want. It's that kind of growth which will allow the government to get revenues which can be laid out for health, education, sanitation, etc. It's that kind of growth which will give jobs. So I'm hoping that people will go back and rediscover the magic of 2004-8 and be passionately focused on growth. That should be the mantra for the next few years.
So the return to 7% and 8% is irrespective of who wins the election?
I didn't say that. What I said is that if they follow the path that we have laid down and observe the fundamentals that we have laid out, then I think growth is assured. But if someone comes to muck up this whole thing, I'm afraid we'll pay a price. I sincerely hope that that won't happen. I think there are enough talented young men and women across the political spectrum who understand the need for growth. Can I respond to what Tom said?
Yeah.
I agree with his, the imagery that he presented. If a white line is not there, if a street light is not burning, that can be fixed. It can be fixed by just better governance, not even better governance, better supervision, tighter accountability, punishing people who are remiss. But if there's a speed bump called political reform, that can't be fixed. That can't be fixed by a fiat. That can only be done by the state in China reinventing itself. I wish they reinvent themselves. But between reinventing a state to do political reform and getting the white lines and the street lights, I think white lines and street lights is an easier and more doable job.
On that particular note, I'm afraid we are flat out of time, so we're going to have to end this session. Thank you all so much for having joined us. I'd like to thank all of you so much as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.